From Gilbert Arenas giving the Wizards an A+ grade on the Anthony Davis trade to Nick Young calling Washington, where they send the trash when your career is nearly over. In this video, we're breaking down how NBA players, coaches, and analysts reacted to Anthony Davis being traded to the Washington Wizards. Gilbert Arenas. Let's start with a man who knows the Washington Wizards franchise better than almost anyone alive, Gilbert Arenas, Agent Zero himself. The man who once carried this franchise on his back, who hit buzzer beaters and made the nation's capital believe in basketball again. And when the news broke that Anthony Davis was heading to DC, Gilbert Arenas didn't hesitate for even a second. He went straight to his podcast, Gil's Arena, and he gave the Wizards, and I want you to hear this very clearly, an A+ grade on this trade. And it wasn't just some throwaway compliment. Arenas laid out exactly why he believed this move was transformative for the franchise. He talked about the pick and roll potential between Trae Young and Anthony Davis, a combination that, on paper, could be absolutely devastating for opposing defenses. He talked about the defensive upside, especially with young talents like Alex Sarr and Bilal Coulibaly flanking Davis on the perimeter. He saw a team that could genuinely be elite on both ends of the floor. As he put it, you've got a situation where you pair them up with Trae Young, Alex Sarr, and you keep your draft pick, A+ right now on trades. But Arenas wasn't naive either. He knows Davis's injury history better than most, having called him frustrating in the past, and once saying he fall down one time and be like, oh my God. Still, the former All-Star declared himself a fan of AD in Washington and predicted playoff contention if Davis could stay on the floor, even suggesting the Wizards should sit Davis this season to secure a high draft pick and prepare for a real run next year. Nick Young. Now, if Gilbert Arenas represented the optimistic side of the coin, then his fellow former Wizard and former teammate on Gil's Arena, Nick Young, brought the absolute polar opposite energy to the conversation. Swaggy P did not hold back whatsoever, and honestly, what he said was one of the most brutally honest assessments of the entire trade. Nick Young looked at this deal and didn't see the upside. He didn't see the potential. He didn't see the pick and roll chemistry or the defensive anchor narrative. What Nick Young saw, with the unflinching honesty that has always defined his personality, was a franchise that has historically been the final destination for players whose best days are behind them. He said, bluntly, that Washington is where they send the trash when your career is nearly over. And look, that's a harsh thing to say, but Nick Young wasn't done. He went even further by resurrecting the nickname that has followed Anthony Davis around for years, a nickname that Davis absolutely despises, calling him Anthony Street Clothes Davis. The implication being that Davis spends more time in street clothes on the bench than he does in uniform on the court. And honestly, the numbers do support that criticism to a degree. Davis played only 29 games in his single season in Dallas, but even Swaggy P had to acknowledge the one silver lining for Davis in Washington. Trae Young might just be the best teammate Davis has ever had. The pick and roll potential is undeniable, even if Young remains deeply skeptical about whether Davis can actually stay healthy long enough for it to matter. Naji Marshall. While the former players were debating the merits and the pitfalls of this trade from the outside, there was one person on the inside of the Dallas Mavericks locker room who couldn't contain his initial reaction. That person was Naji Marshall, a forward who had been suiting up alongside Anthony Davis all season long. And when the news dropped that AD was being shipped to Washington, Marshall did what so many of us do in the age of social media. He went straight to X and posted a single word that captured everything he was feeling in that moment. Just one word, wow. And really, what more needed to be said? That one word encapsulated the shock, the disbelief, the suddenness of it all. 1 minute, you're teammates with a 10-time All-Star, and the next minute he's gone. But here's the thing about Naji Marshall. He didn't stay in that state of shock for very long, because almost immediately, Marshall pivoted his focus toward the future, toward the shining beacon of hope that the entire Dallas Mavericks franchise is now orbiting around. Cooper Flagg, the #1 overall pick, the generational talent who fell into Dallas's lap, thanks to those ping-pong balls bouncing their way in the lottery. And Marshall made his feelings about that future crystal clear in an interview, saying, I want to play with Cooper Flagg my whole expletive career. That's my dog, and he's going to create history, and to be a part of it is a blessing. For Marshall, this trade wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something potentially historic. And in a way, Marshall's reaction perfectly encapsulated the duality of this entire trade from the Dallas perspective. Yes, you're losing a 10-time All-Star. Yes, it stings. But when you look forward and see Cooper Flagg on your roster, a player with the kind of ceiling that comes along once in a generation, the future suddenly looks a lot brighter than the present ever did. Kyrie Irving. If Naji Marshall represented the vocal enthusiasm about Dallas's future, then Kyrie Irving, the other remaining star on the Mavericks roster, took a decidedly more measured and introspective approach to the news. And really, can you blame him? This is a man who has seen so much upheaval over the course of his career, from Cleveland to Boston to Brooklyn to Dallas. And now he's watching yet another seismic shift happen around him. Through his agent, Irving released a statement that was careful, deliberate, and very much on brand for a player who has always chosen his words with precision. The message was that Kyrie is just processing the changes, but remains committed to Dallas. And sources close to the team confirmed that there are absolutely no plans to trade Irving before the deadline. In fact, the franchise envisions him as the veteran leader and mentor for Cooper Flagg, the bridge between eras, the experienced hand who can guide a young superstar through the growing pains of the NBA. Former Mavs coach Avery Johnson himself underscored the importance of this question on CBS Sports, specifically addressing what comes next for Kyrie.
What's next for this franchise to try to start rebuilding now around him?
Well, I think the key is going to be what happens with Kyrie Irving. Because Kyrie, obviously, he'll sit out this entire season, with that ACL. What's next for him? Is he going to be a part of the short-term future? Because we know he's getting towards, the end of his career. Or are they going to move him, in the off season to try to bring in another younger piece to continue this rebuild around Cooper Flagg?
It's worth remembering that Irving once revealed he dreamed of teaming up with Anthony Davis and Kevin Durant back in his Boston days in 2018, envisioning a powerhouse trio. That dream obviously never materialized, and now Davis is gone from Dallas too, but Kyrie remains, committed to the next chapter. And there's something poignant about that. The fact that a player who has seen so many different locker rooms, so many different cities, so many different iterations of what a team could be, is choosing to stay put and invest in the long game. For a franchise desperately in need of stability, that quiet commitment might be worth more than any blockbuster trade. Avery Johnson. Sometimes the most valuable perspective on a trade doesn't come from the players involved. It comes from the coaches who have been in those war rooms, who have sat through those agonizing front office meetings, who understand the mechanics and the emotions of roster construction at the deepest level. And that's exactly the kind of insight that former Mavericks coach Avery Johnson brought to the table when CBS Sports brought him on to discuss the deal. Johnson described the trade as something that should come as no surprise to anyone who has been paying attention. He called it, quite simply, closure. Closure for a fan base that has been in an uproar ever since the Luka Doncic trade rocked the franchise to its core, and he laid it out plainly.
The headliner here is a year and 2 days after the Luka Doncic trade, the Mavericks already shipping Anthony Davis out of town. Hey, Avery, I remember talking to you a year and 2 days ago about the Luka trade that stunned everybody. I mean, how are people in Dallas going to feel about this?
No surprise. This was a situation where, the fans, they've been in an uproar about this Luka Doncic trade. So with Anthony Davis moving on, it's basically going to bring closure to what I call a generational trade. Fortunately for the Mavericks, they'll be able to shed about $70 million next year from their salary cap to give them more flexibility, really to build now around Cooper Flagg. This is the Cooper Flagg show.
But Johnson didn't just talk about Dallas. When asked about the Wizards' perspective and what the team could look like with Davis and Trae Young paired together, he offered a tempered but genuine assessment.
Well, I think they could be a play-in team in the Eastern Conference if they're healthy. But that's the big, question mark. Right? Injuries is always the greatest neutralizer. And if you look at Anthony Davis being the cornerstone along with Trae Young, Trae Young's been injured, especially this season. So again, it's a big question mark. Yes, if they're healthy, can they be a play-in team? Yes, but that team is still not scaring anybody in the Eastern Conference.
And then there's the man who, even in his diminished role as minority owner, still commands the attention of every Mavericks fan whenever he opens his mouth. Mark Cuban. Mark Cuban, the man who built the Mavericks into a championship-winning franchise, the man who sat courtside for 2 decades and bled blue. And when news of the Anthony Davis trade broke, Cuban's reaction was swift and characteristically positive. He said simply, "Love it." Now that might seem surprising at first. How can you love trading away a 10-time All-Star? But Cuban, ever the businessman, wasn't looking at what was leaving. He was looking at what was being gained. He acknowledged that losing great players is always tough, but emphasized that the deal provides picks and flexibility to build around Cooper Flagg. Cuban had previously stated the Mavericks want to try to win with Davis and even predicted finals contention, if healthy, but reality had other plans. Davis played only 29 games, missed 51, and the team went 31-49 since his arrival. The numbers told the story that optimism couldn't rewrite, and Cuban was clearly ready to turn the page and start writing a new chapter around Flagg. Stephen A. Smith. If there's one person on planet Earth who was going to take this moment and turn it into an absolute spectacle, a theatrical, finger-pointing, desk-slamming event, it's Stephen A. Smith. And the man did not disappoint, not even a little bit, because Stephen A. didn't just react to the Anthony Davis trade. He used it as evidence for something much bigger, something that has conspiracy theorists and basketball fans alike sitting up in their chairs. On First Take, Stephen A. reflected on the entire Luka Doncic saga, calling the original trade what it is. In his words, arguably the worst trade in NBA history. And the panel didn't hold back when dissecting how the last 365 days unfolded for the Mavericks.
The Mavericks' last 365 days are one of the more fascinating sagas that I've seen in my 2+ decades covering the league. Not just because of the Cooper Flagg part of it, which they get a potentially generational player on the heels of trading one away, but also because Kyrie Irving got hurt. This is the act that nobody seems to ever count in it. And then the conversation turned to Davis himself, and this is where it got truly pointed.
But when you look at Anthony Davis, he's played 29 games. He missed 51. They're 31-49 since he arrived in town. It's not good. And listen, Anthony Davis is an all-world player when healthy. He needs to understand, I'm glad you got your money, bro, because you will forever be attached to and synonymous with being the guy.
But Stephen A. went even further than just calling out the trade's failure. He speculated, and this is where it gets really interesting, that the Mavericks' decisions might be part of a larger plan to relocate the franchise to Las Vegas under owner Miriam Adelson, suggesting that tanking via the Doncic and Davis deals makes moving a losing team easier. As he put it, "My spidey senses are tingling," citing Adelson's casino empire ties. Whether you agree with his Vegas relocation theory or think it's completely outlandish, you have to respect the fact that Stephen A. Smith always keeps the conversation going in directions that nobody else would dare to explore. Jake Fischer. While the hot take artists were having their moment in the spotlight, there was one NBA insider who brought the kind of measured, detail-oriented analysis that hardcore basketball fans truly crave. Jake Fischer, one of the most respected insiders in the business, didn't just react to the trade, he dissected it with surgical precision. Fischer expressed genuine surprise that the Washington Wizards were the team that emerged as the buyer for Anthony Davis. It wasn't a destination that most people had on their radar, but what impressed Fischer was how Washington pulled it off. They used Chris Middleton's expiring contract and non-premium draft picks to acquire a 10-time All-Star. That's buying low in the most intelligent way possible. Fischer highlighted the Wizards' aim to pair Davis with Alex Sarr for a dual big frontcourt, creating a defensive wall that could anchor the team for years to come. He also noted that the move signals the Wizards' long-term commitment to Trae Young, implying that an extension is likely on the horizon. Fischer had previously reported that the Hawks were out on acquiring Davis, which narrowed the market considerably and ultimately led to Washington swooping in. In a league where teams routinely mortgage their futures for a shot at relevance, the Wizards found a way to add a superstar while keeping their core intact and their future draft capital largely untouched. That's the kind of front office work that doesn't always make headlines, but it's the kind that builds sustainable franchises. Bobby Marks. When it comes to the financial intricacies and the salary cap gymnastics of NBA trades, there is perhaps no one in the entire media landscape who understands the numbers better than Bobby Marks. The former front office executive turned ESPN analyst has made a career out of breaking down the dollars and cents behind every deal. And when the Anthony Davis trade landed on his desk, he went to work. Starting with the Dallas side of things, Marks was unequivocal. This was the right call.
I will say this. This was probably the best move that the Mavericks organization could do. And AD is a great player, but he does not fit the Mavericks timeline. To be able to wipe the slate clean and pick up 5 picks, and you can debate all you want what the picks are, and give yourself a ton of flexibility to build your roster around Cooper Flagg. You will have a lottery pick.
And then Marx delivered a line about Dallas that perfectly summed up the emotional weight of this trade for the franchise and its fans. It was about more than just basketball.
And you move forward, you basically kind of cleanse yourself of everything that you've received in the Luka trade, except for Max Christie and that Laker pick here. And you move forward as an organization and you start building this thing the right way around your generational former #1 pick in Cooper Flagg.
For the Wizards, Marx was equally impressed, noting they essentially skipped the line on the rebuilding process, and he pushed back on the idea that cap space alone could have gotten them here.
And basically you kind of you jump ahead of, if there's a line waiting for food, you basically you're basically skipping line in a good way. When we look at next year, when you have a lineup of Trae Young, Trey Johnson, Bilal Coulibaly, AD, and Alex Sarr. That's pretty good if they stay healthy, right? And you still have Carrington and Kaishan George, Will Riley, Champagne. I like what they did. Cap space is fool's gold. Cap space is overrated. They were not going to be able to get Trae Young in free agency. They were not going to be able to get Anthony Davis in free agency, and you go out and get him.
Marx called this a move that could prove to be well worth it for Washington, emphasizing the incredibly low cost of acquisition and the fact that the Wizards gave up none of their core young players in the process. David Aldridge. David Aldridge is a Hall of Fame journalist. He's covered the NBA for decades, and when it comes to the Washington Wizards specifically, there may not be a more authoritative voice in all of sports media. So when Aldridge went on Grant and Danny to share his thoughts on the Anthony Davis trade, people listened very carefully.
David, Anthony Davis, a blockbuster trade, 10-time All-Star, future Hall of Famer coming to the Wizards. Your reaction to the deal?
As surprised as everybody else. Not that they made a deal, but that it was for Anthony Davis.
That distinction is critical. Aldridge wasn't shocked that the Wizards made a big swing. They had telegraphed their willingness to pivot from the rebuild. He was surprised that the specific target was Anthony Davis. And when he explained why, he laid bare the central tension that defines this entire trade.
This is a big swing. This is a big old, huge swing. Not because of what they gave up, because when you really look at it, they didn't give up all that much in terms of draft picks. But just that they're taking a chance on AD being a contributing player. And again, this is all next season. I don't think he's going to play very much at all this season, if at all. But being able to be a player who stays on the floor long enough to help your young guys get better. And that is the puzzle and the conundrum that is Anthony Davis. And it has been for years. Nobody doubts the talent, but it doesn't matter if he never plays. And that's been his problem for much of the last 3 or 4 years. He just doesn't play very much.
But Aldridge also took the long view, analyzing the worst case and best case scenarios with the kind of nuance that only comes from decades of covering this league.
I mean, and the best case scenario is that he plays very well and Trae Young plays very well and this team makes the playoffs next year. While not giving up, and it's important to say this, they didn't give up any of their core guys.
Aldridge saw this as the Wizards officially ending the tank and pivoting to compete, but he stressed that the upcoming draft lottery remains their biggest at-bat. Because even with Trae Young and Anthony Davis on your roster, if you can land a top pick in what many scouts consider to be a loaded draft class, you might just have the foundation for something truly special. But if you lose that pick, or if it falls outside the top 8 and conveys to New York, well, that changes the math considerably. Fred Catz. Fred Catz of The Athletic summed up the Wizards' move with a question that was deceptively simple, yet captured the entire essence of the trade in just 2 words. Why not? And honestly, when you sit down and really think about it, when you strip away all the noise and the hot takes and the overreactions, that might be the most sensible reaction of them all. Katz's logic was straightforward and compelling. He pointed out that Anthony Davis is, when healthy, a great player. That's not debatable, that's just a fact. And the Wizards acquired him without losing any of their core young pieces. They didn't trade Alex Sarr. They didn't trade Bilal Coulibaly. They didn't give up their own first-round picks. They essentially used matching salary and other teams' draft picks to land a future Hall of Famer. So yeah, why not? Catz also expressed intrigue about the summer extension talks, noting that how the Wizards handled Davis' $62.8 million player option for 2027 to 28 will tell us a lot about their long-term vision. For Dallas, Catz saw this as closure, the final chapter of the Doncic era, and a necessary clearing of the deck to build properly around Cooper Flagg. Sometimes in the NBA discourse, where everything is either the greatest move ever or the worst decision in franchise history, the simplest, most level-headed analysis is the one that stands the test of time. And Fred Catz nailed it with just 2 words. Why not? O'Shea Jackson Jr. Now we arrive at a reaction that came from a somewhat unexpected place, but one that perfectly captured the raw, emotional human element of this entire saga. O'Shea Jackson Jr. Yes, the actor. The man who portrayed his father Ice Cube in the film Straight Outta Compton, but also a deeply passionate Lakers fan and serious basketball mind, was on The Rich Eisen Show when the news broke in real time, and his immediate gut-level reaction said everything.
While you guys were recording this, Anthony Davis is on his way to the Wizards.
How about that?
Poor guy.
Those 2 words, poor guy, said everything. Jackson didn't lead with analysis. He didn't lead with trade grades or salary cap implications. He led with empathy, with genuine human sympathy for a player who has been traded and uprooted multiple times and blindsided by franchise decisions that were beyond his control. But then the conversation quickly turned to what this means for Washington as a basketball city, and Jackson got genuinely excited.
Poor guy.
Yeah.
Poor guy. Why? Trey Young's there.
That's cool.
Let me tell you something.
Elsewhere.
When the Wizards get better,
Yeah.
that area is going to be nuts over that team. Like, that is a fan base ready to pop.
Yes, the DMV.
For their basketball team.
The DMV, you know,
Right,
I shot
so-
Swagger out there for years.
You know, listen, I said the NFL draft is in Washington, D.C. next year, 2027. Washington Wizards will be in the playoffs when we're there for the draft.
Absolutely not.
He said no.
I say yes.
I say yes, too. What do you say?
Oh, man. I don't know, man.
And then, in a moment that truly showed the depth of his respect and affection for Anthony Davis as a player and a person, Jackson closed with one of the most heartfelt statements anyone made about this entire trade.
I need Anthony Davis to be upset, because this should not happen to a player of his caliber, the way that this has gone down. For him to be traded in the middle of the night, you know, without any
It happened
word.
today. It happened today.
No, I'm talking about with the Lakers.
Oh, okay.
That is the wrong way to handle a player like Anthony Davis. Yeah. We got Luka, so I'm going to shut up. But for the next season, for you to be traded again, like, it's got to hit something in your heart. And I hope he returns to the player that won the championship in 2020. God bless Anthony Davis. I love him to death.
I think he's in a what a world, but I think he's in a good spot.
It's the Wizards.
I really do think so. What do you think of the Harden trade?
And we can't wrap this up without mentioning Nick Wright, who delivered one of the most balanced takes on the entire trade. Nick Wright. Wright, known for his sharp analysis and willingness to go against the grain, pulled no punches when it came to the Dallas side of this deal. But he also gave Washington genuine credit where credit was due.
Obviously, the Luka trade was a disaster, but a sub-disaster is getting this little out of 1 year of Anthony Davis and then Anthony Davis on the trade market. The fact that you got no playoff run with Anthony Davis, the fact that by my reading of it, you are trading Anthony Davis when his value is, you got less for Anthony Davis, markedly less than the Grizzlies got for Triple J.
Yeah.
And so that's not good business.
Why would you do it now? Why the urgency? Why couldn't you do it in the summer?
I don't understand the Mavs, and I think Brew's point is correct.
Wright questioned the urgency of the trade. Why couldn't Dallas have waited until the summer, and expressed genuine empathy for Mavericks fans who he felt had something stolen from them through no fault of their own. But then he pivoted to the Washington side and made a case that cut right to the heart of why this trade makes sense for the Wizards.
For Washington, I think this is a great move. So I disagree with you in this. Yeah, because to me, Brew, it is very little risk with potential very high upside. Like, I don't look at anything they traded away as something they're going to in 4 years be like, damn it. Like that's our version of trading away a young SGA, and now he's come back to be a league MVP.
That's the key insight right there. Washington didn't give up anything that's going to haunt them. They didn't trade away a future superstar. They didn't sacrifice their own picks. They made a move that, even in the worst case scenario, doesn't set the franchise back, and in the best case, could propel them into legitimate contention in the Eastern Conference. Very little risk, very high upside. Sometimes that's all you need to hear. Grok Research Transcript Claude. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.